Hello and welcome to yet another favorites video in my series going genre by genre, sharing my top 10 favorites. I've already done fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and literary fiction, so you can check those out in the playlist here. But today is all about classics. Now I do kind of want to give a caveat at the start of this because I feel like I haven't read as many classics as I would like to. There are so many classics on my TBR, many of them behind me on my shelves, but also just literally hundreds of classics that I am interested in reading. But it's just one of those things, I'm sure many of you understand, where when I sit down to read a classic, I really want to be able to focus on it completely. I really want to give it my all. And I often, like many of us these days, am constantly running around and busy and thinking about a million different things and feeling like I can't do these classics justice or I can't give them the attention they deserve, which honestly might be a remnant of my perfectionistic days, and it's probably something I just have to let go of. But that being said, there are so many, just hundreds and hundreds of classics that I have not yet read that I would love to, so just keep that in mind. These are my 10 favorites of the small, tiny little portion of the classic canon that I have actually read. But of course, just like with any other genre, but maybe more than in any other genre, I would love to know what your favorite classics are, so please let me know in the comments, because I would really like to start prioritizing reading classics more and sort of sprinkling them in with my other reads, because it's something that's important to me, and I think I just have to stop putting so much pressure on it. So with that being said, in today's video I have my 10 favorites, and they're all 5-star reads, so maybe more than any other list so far. This one is not really a ranking so much as just my 10 favorites because it's really hard to compare any of these. I love them all for different reasons, and they're all fantastic books, so putting one above another feels wrong on so many levels. But as per usual, I will have a bonus extra video with even more favorites that didn't fit in my top 10 for my patrons. So if you want to see the bonus video with even more of my favorite classics or the bonus videos for any of my past videos, you can join my Patreon at any of the 4 paid tiers with the link in my description box. We would love to have you in the Patreon anyway. I'm also considering opening up YouTube memberships as a way for other people who are not patrons and maybe uninterested in being on the Patreon platform to get access to the bonus videos. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I know not everyone is really a fan of Patreon or wants to join a separate platform, so it might be easier for some people to have it all in one place. So let me know what you think. I've been toying with the idea, but nothing is set in stone, so I'd love to hear your input as per always. Before we get into it, I want to thank Wilde for partnering with me on this video. Wilde was founded by 2 childhood friends in 2020, and their mission was to reduce single-use plastics in everyday essentials. They very quickly have become the UK's #1 refillable aluminum-free deodorant, and they make deodorants, body washes and hand washes, and lip balms that come in premium reusable cases that are designed to last a lifetime, and compostable refills that arrive at your door with no single-use plastic in the packaging. I am always looking for ways to reduce how much plastic I use every day, so I really appreciate what Wilde is doing with their products. As you'll know, I have been vegan for a very long time, so I'm very happy to say that Wilde's products are both 100% vegan and Leaping Bunny certified. Their products are powered by plants with no aluminum salts or parabens. Since Wilde started production, they have saved over 612 tons of single-use plastic from landfills. But of course, Wilde didn't just stop there. With every single purchase, they plant a tree thanks to their partnership with On a Mission. Wilde has a gorgeous, refillable, yet aesthetic design. Choose from over 8 case options and even get your case engraved to personalize it. Whether you go with one of their regular collection or a collab, or maybe one of their special edition cases like their cat cases, which I am absolutely in love with. Refills are super easy to put in the cases and swap out. All you have to do is wind your case right down to the bottom, slide the bottom out of your case, remove the used refill and slot a new refill into position, push the bottom with the refill back into your case, and twist up to use. They also have really unique and honestly scrumptious scents, from limited edition and seasonal options to the classics, and their deodorant has a lovely creamy texture thanks thanks to the shea butter. No crumbly deodorant here. I've been using Wilde for over a month now. Their deodorant every single day and their body wash every time I take a shower, plus their lip balm every time my lips get dry, and I'm having an amazing experience. Not only do the cases feel weighty and high quality and lovely, but the scents, oh my gosh, the scents are delectable. When I tell you they smell amazing, I am not exaggerating. They smell so good and they're effective, keeping me smelling fresh for 24 hours. Because Wilde has partnered with me on this video, you can get 20% off using my code PlantBasedBride with the QR code or with the link in the description box. This code doesn't last long, so make sure to use code PlantBasedBride for 20% off. Click that QR code or the link in my description box to try Wilde today. Whether you're trying their body wash, hand wash, deodorant, or lip balm, all of them are full of natural nourishment, vegan, and super effective, and I highly recommend. Thank you again to Wilde for partnering with me on this video. And for my fellow cat lovers, if you want their limited edition cat cases, check them out ASAP. These will not last long, but they are so adorable. And I'm going to start with one that is very short but incredibly impactful, and that is Passing by Nella Larsen. Passing was originally published in the US in 1929, and it takes place in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, and it is at its core an exploration of race and colorism, identity, class, privilege, and it follows two childhood friends who are both mixed race, and one is living as a Black woman, embracing her Black identity, and the other has been living as a white woman, passing as white, and is married to a white man. Honestly, this is such a short book, but it is so deeply impactful if you enjoy stories that are at their core about identity and on intersectionality and how the different facets of our identity can really impact our lives and who we are as people. I think this is such a cutting exploration of race and racial identity and the experience of existing in the world as a mixed race person and often feeling like you are forced to choose one identity or another, not necessarily being able to embrace both or live as both, but also even further in this time and place, the vast differences in your opportunities in life and your rights and freedoms as a Black person or a white person, especially as a Black woman or a white woman. The differences are stark, and these childhood friends, though they share a very similar background, their lived experiences are polar opposites. They are so vastly different. And there's a lot of complex morality here as well, because the character who is choosing to pass as white is inherently choosing to side with the oppressor, the group that is oppressing her other identity and who would turn her out and treat her horribly if they found out who she really was. And there is that push and pull and that judgment from some of the characters in the book, but also her own internal, roiling, competing feelings about this choice that she's made. And it's just fascinating. It is so insightful and honestly very fast-paced and engaging. And there is that sense of danger or tension because she is in a very risky position if she is found out. And there's also an undertone or an implied sapphic romance as well that adds just that extra layer to the danger of the situation they're in. And I just loved this. I thought it was so well done. Again, it is such a short book, but it really drives home the point so clearly and it's beautifully written. I would highly recommend it, just like every book on this list, obviously, but that is Passing by Nella Larsen. Moving on to number 9 on my list, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Originally published in 1938, Rebecca is a gothic psychological horror set on an English estate in the early 20th century, and we follow an unnamed young woman as our protagonist who has met and married a wealthy widower who has a mysterious past. And when she moves into his secluded estate, she starts to feel like there is someone watching her, a presence that no one quite talks about. And it's such a great book. I love it so much. It is very mysterious, very tension-filled. We are following our protagonist as she tries to figure out what in the world is happening and learn the secrets of her husband's past and try to tangle out why there is this strange, unsettling feeling at the estate. She is really trying to figure out her place and try to feel like she belongs here, but she also becomes somewhat obsessed. It's just absolutely fascinating. It's a pretty long book, but it is so engaging. I was engrossed from the first page to the last. It has some similarities to Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is not on this list. It is not one of my favorite classics, but I can definitely see the similarities in the storyline and some of the characterization between Jane Eyre and Rebecca, but this story just has so much more of a focus on that psychological horror element, on the tension, on the mystery, and I loved the themes that it was exploring, especially when it comes to a woman's place in society or the limitations placed on women, especially at this time period, the limitations on their freedom, their role in a marriage, on an estate, in society at large, their lack of choices and options without a man, and what that can lead to, the unhealthy dynamics or the power imbalances that can grow from that lack of freedom and mobility for women, but also, you know, an exploration of identity. Who is our protagonist? Does she know who she is? Can she figure out who she is and grow into the person she's meant to be when she is living in someone else's shadow? I just found this absolutely fascinating. The characters are incredibly vivid. The setting really is its own separate character, and the mystery is so engaging to unravel. If you struggle to read classics, if you tend to find them a bit boring or hard to follow, I would highly recommend Rebecca. It really does read like genre fiction. It is a very fast-paced, very exciting book, and it might just open the door for you into more classics. So definitely check out Rebecca if you're a fan of Gothic fiction, mystery, psychological horror. It is a fascinating read, and I love it. And now for something completely different. We have number 8 on my list, which is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. The Fire Next Time is 2 separate essays in one collection, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Baldwin has a way with words, to put it very mildly, and these essays are so poignant and vulnerable and honest and cutting and powerful and emotionally resonant. His writing is gorgeous and poetic and really takes you on a journey, and the themes are so important and unfortunately just as relevant today as they were when he published these works in the 60s. These are nonfiction, social critique. They are exploring issues of race and religion, civil rights in the US, Black identity, justice, family, personal resilience. The first story in the collection is a letter from him to his nephew. And while both essays are incredible, and I would highly recommend, that first essay in particular has so many gorgeous lines. It's just poetry, and I'm getting emotional talking about it because it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous letter. And there's just so much emotion. There's so much love in every word. This hope from an uncle to a nephew that he will have a better life, that things will move forward, that the world will become a more equal, a kinder place. Sorry, I just think it's absolutely gorgeous, and this was my first experience with James Baldwin and immediately made me a fan, and I have since read a little bit more of his work, though I have even more to go, and I'm just in awe of him, honestly. So if you have not tried James Baldwin, I mean, everything I've read from him is amazing. I'm sure everything I haven't read yet is also amazing, but to me, this was a very accessible place to start with his work and just transcends time in a way that I think is very difficult to do. It feels incredibly timeless while also being in so many ways a product of its time. I feel like that sounds like word salad or something, but if you've read it, hopefully you understand what I mean. I just think it's gorgeous. Again, a really accessible place to start with his work and very moving. So that is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Next up, number 7 on my list. Again, I'm putting these in a list because that's how I've structured this whole series, but this isn't really a ranking, okay? I love all of these equally. Just saying that again. But anyway, number 7 on my list is probably maybe the most controversial pick of this list, maybe. A lot of people are not a fan of this, but I loved it, and that is Wide Sargasso Sea by Rhys. This is a commentary on Jane Eyre, and I read it in a reading vlog along with Jane Eyre, so I'll link that if you want to watch the experience of me reading both of these for the first time and sharing my thoughts and feelings. I thought this was a gorgeous deepening of the story of a character in Jane Eyre who is given very little consideration by the larger narrative. This is post-colonial literature, historical fiction, a bit of a prequel or retelling of Jane Eyre. And this was originally published in 1966 by a British Dominican author. And I have seen people describe it as fan fiction in a derogatory way. I think that is very reductive. I think books can be critiques or retellings or commentaries on other works that already exist. I think that is a completely valid area to explore in literature, and Wide Sargasso Sea is largely recognized as a classic in its own right. So as much as I don't think there is anything wrong with fan fiction, and I don't think we should be using fan fiction as a derogatory thing, I also don't think that this is fan fiction. So I think that distinction is important. This takes place in the 19th century in both the Caribbean and in England, and explores the backstory of a character who is, again, very overlooked, who has a very reductive story in Jane Eyre. I won't say too much about who that is, because if you haven't read Jane Eyre, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but this is a book that explores colonialism, misogyny, mental illness, ableism, and the intersections of race and class and gender and freedom and autonomy. So much of this book hit me so hard. It is incredibly visceral and emotional. It is very raw and real. It feels like pulling back the curtain to a different place in time. It really drops you in and you feel like you're there. It is very evocative. It has such a strong sense of place. And the main character is given such a strong, memorable voice. And I think that's my favorite thing. I'm gonna get emotional again. Oh no, I've opened the floodgates. I just think that's my favorite thing about this book, is giving a woman a voice. Giving a woman who is used as a plot point or as a twist, as shock value, as motivation for other characters in a different story, taking a character who is a woman of color and mentally ill and giving her her own voice and her own wants and needs and dreams and personality. It's a very sad story. It is hard to read. It is harrowing, but it's also beautiful. And I really appreciate giving this character her own life and giving her the respect that I didn't feel she fully got in Jane Eyre, which is, again, probably why this will be a controversial pick. I know a lot of people love Jane Eyre. I don't hate Jane Eyre by any means. I liked it. I thought it was good. I gave it 3 stars. That is a good rating for me. It just isn't a favorite. And one of my least favorite things about it was how it treated the main character that is picked up and explored in this book. And for me, this was really that missing puzzle piece that analyzed and interrogated a lot of the things that I felt Jane Eyre wasn't willing to engage with. So anyways, that is Wide Sargasso Sea. Again, probably a controversial pick. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments. I mean, I love dissenting opinions. I love differing opinions. I am so happy to have discussions and debates and engage in critical thought together. But of course, as always, please be respectful and kind to each other in the comments, but also to me. You are free to have a different opinion on this book, on Jane Eyre, on the characters, that's totally fine. But we can all be kind and respectful in our conversations, please and thank you, because some of the other times I've talked about my feelings about Jane Eyre and Wide Sargasso Sea, I have received some pretty rude comments, so please be kind. That is all I ask. Next on my list, we have some Latin American literature, which I have already established on this channel. I have a growing love of Latin American literature. For whatever reason, it just works for me. I just really enjoy it. And this is one of the first books I read from the Latin American classic canon, and I absolutely adored it. So number 7 on my list is the Posthumous Memoirs of Brás, Cubas by Machado de Assis. This is a laugh out loud funny book. I feel like most of the books on this list are more serious, but this one is definitely hilarious, and I love it for that so much. This book made me laugh out loud more than many books that I've read in my life, to be honest, and it was not what I expected going into it. So this was originally published in 1881 in Brazil, and it's set in the 19th century Brazil, so set in the time that it was written. And it is metafiction, it's satirical fiction, and it's the story of a dead man who is narrating his own life from the grave. As he is being eaten by maggots, he is recapping his life and sort of deconstructing society of the time and playing with societal norms, sort of tearing them apart so we can really examine them from the inside, reminiscing on his good times, speaking with regret about some of his mistakes. But all of it is framed in that sort of witty, satirical way, and I just loved it. I thought it was so funny. I really, truly did laugh so much reading this. It was just exactly my sense of humor in so many ways. It is, a book about mortality, death, existentialism, social critique, and all that entails, critiques of governments and societal rules and wealth disparities and poverty, treatment of women, but also, just doing all the things that satire does best, which is really shining a light on our society and using humor as a way to really pull it apart and examine it on a deeper level. It's kind of like what I talked about in my horror favorites video, that I love horror that uses the genre as a way to examine our society. Same thing with my science fiction video. I mean, I'm a bit of a broken record. I do love books that examine society and take a critical look at, apply a critical lens to the society that we live in instead of just taking it as a given, really trying to tease it apart and explore it and be critical of it. And, I think science fiction can do that really well. I think horror can be a great vehicle for it. And I think humor and satire is another amazing way to do that. And I just loved this. It really gave me a vision of a time and place that is so removed from my experience. It was so funny, so fast-paced and snappy and enjoyable to read. But again, it explores some important themes. It is not just about the jokes. It really has a deeper layer and deeper meaning. And I really was attached to and engaged with the characters in a way that I love as a character-driven reader. So I would highly recommend the Posthumous Memoirs of Brás Cubas if you have not checked it out. It's a classic for a reason, just like every book on this list, but maybe a classic that is less well known by my fellow Canadians or my American viewers or my other viewers from around the world who are not from Latin America, but definitely an absolute favorite of mine. And this was really the spark that lit my interest in Latin American literature in many ways. Next on my list, number 5, is a book written for children, but that doesn't mean it can't be loved and read by adults, and that is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. L.M. Montgomery is a Canadian icon. We love her here in Canada, and Anne is also a Canadian icon. She is a character that really encapsulates one aspect of the Canadian spirit, I would say, and I really resonate with her. One of my favorite books from my childhood. I reread it a million times, probably not even exaggerating there. The whole series is worth a read, and I do have a reading vlog rereading the entire series if you want to check it out. There are actually 8 books in the series, but my favorite in the series, now and forever, is the first book. There is just something so nostalgic about it, both literally because it is a book I read a lot as a child, but also because it calls back an earlier time in Canada. It's set in late 19th century Prince Edward Island and was published in 1908. So it was telling a story of, a few decades earlier than when it was published, but it's really a coming of age story for our protagonist Anne, and we follow her as she moves to a new place, develops a family, makes lifelong friends, finds her sense of purpose and finds what she loves and what she's passionate about in life, but also finds the place that she feels at home, the place that will always be home. Getting emotional again. Good Lord. It's beautiful, it's funny, it's silly, it is heartfelt and wholesome. The characters are incredible. My favorite part of this book are the characters. Marilla and Matthew, Anne, her bosom buddy, her kindred spirit, Diana. This is, a book full of hijinks and mishaps and mistakes and struggles as we follow Anne, who definitely has ADHD. I recognize myself in her with that as she tries to figure out how to exist in the world and how to follow the rules that she has to follow while also being true to herself as a dreamer. And it's just delightful. So if you haven't tried Anne of Green Gables, not only will you be reading one of Canada's literary national treasures, but you'll also be reading a story that hopefully will touch you as much as it did me and just feel nostalgic and like home, even if it's the first time you're reading it. One of my favorite things about L.M. Montgomery's writing in general is her ability to write that really strong sense of place. Her nature writing is gorgeous and very poetic and lyrical. So if you're someone who really prioritizes having that beautiful descriptive language, having that really strong sense of place where you can envision so clearly in your mind every place they're talking about, this is going to be a lovely experience for you. That is something I find lacking in a lot of books that I read, and L.M. Montgomery never fails to deliver on that front. So would highly recommend Anne of Green Gables if you have not given it a try. And it's something you can read to the young people in your life. If you have young people in your life, this could be a really great book to read together. So next up, number 4 on my list is another childhood favorite, and that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I love this book. I love it so much. We are following 4 sisters in a family in Civil War era Massachusetts. Each sister represents a different facet of womanhood, and even their mother Marmee represents another. Their wealthy Aunt March represents another, but it really is exploring the multifaceted nature of womanhood, the many different ways that we can exist in the world, really celebrating and loving every different facet of womanhood. And it is also a coming of age story. We follow the girls from a younger age into their adult years, and in the second part we see some of them as parents or entering parenthood, getting married. So you really get to follow them over a long time. And my favorite thing about Little Women, try not to get emotional again, is that sibling relationship, what it is like to be a sister with sisters. I mean, I only have a single sister, but I could really relate as a child to so many of the dynamics in this family. And, you know, you can love your sister so much, but you can also hate them. And, you know, it can be a very complicated, very dynamic, ever-changing relationship, but it can also develop into your deepest friendship. And I have found that with my sister. My big sister is my best friend, and I love her to the moon and back. And I feel like you really see that here as well. These sisters can sometimes hate each other and get on each other's nerves and drive each other up the wall, but they also love each other with so much ferocity. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. A story of family, womanhood, sacrifice, duty and loyalty, love and ambition, and dreaming of something greater. Little Women was originally published in 1869. It was originally written for teenage girls, adolescent girls, sort of on the cusp of womanhood, who would be reading about characters of their own age, of their same age, going through some of the same things they're going through. But it really does work for many ages. I could say younger teens, even, you know, middle grade age kids could read this and enjoy it, but it also is definitely enjoyable for adults as well. So I would highly recommend it if you haven't tried Little Women, especially if you are a sister or have a sister. You might see yourself in one of these sisters, or maybe all of them. I think lots of people tend to pick one and say they are a Jo, or they're a Beth, or a Meg, or an Amy, but I think the reality is that most of us are all of them to varying degrees, which is what makes this able to resonate with people over 100 years after it was originally published. Though I will say that I have always identified with Amy as the youngest in my family. I always felt she was unfairly maligned both in the book and by fans of the book or the various movie adaptations. I love Amy and I see myself in her in many ways, so that's that. Justice for Amy. Next up, number 3 on my list is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This was a book that I picked up kind of on a whim at my local library. I read it in maybe a day. I was so engrossed and so moved by the story, it kind of bowled me over and left me in a book hangover for a few days to a week afterwards. And it's just one of those books that I think everyone should read and can get something from. So this was originally published in 1937, and it's set in the early 20th century in Florida. And we're following our protagonist, who is a Black woman who is really on a journey of self-discovery, and she's navigating trying to find her own version of independence in a time that was really uninterested in giving women independence, but especially Black women independence. And she's also trying to navigate love and figure out how that fits into her life and into her vision of who she wants to be. We're exploring ideas of womanhood, gender roles, independence and freedom, race, and love and resilience, and it's just such a poetic piece of literature. You know, there are books that I would describe as having lyrical writing, and then there are books that are poetry. And to me, Their Eyes Were Watching God is poetry. It's just, the writing is beautiful. It's really almost overwhelming in a way. It feels so of its time. It feels very firmly planted in that time and place and in these characters and their lived experience. And it really leans into the specific dialect, into the rhythms of speech in a way that makes it just feel like music. I don't know how else to describe it. It is so gorgeous. And the story itself is just so engaging and heartbreaking and moving and hopeful. I would highly recommend, obviously, again, just like every book on this list. Honestly, it's probably time for a reread. It's been a few years now, and I only just recently got this Library of America collection, which is 4 of her novels and some of her stories. So I really need to dive in and read even more of her work and do a reread of Their Eyes Were Watching God. But I definitely couldn't make this list without including this one because it really is gorgeous. And now moving on to number 2 on my list, another one representing Latin American literature. We have 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. This is a generational saga. We follow one family for a very long time, and we follow all of the disparate experiences, all of the tangling threads, and there was something very trance-like about this book. I feel like this book put me into a trance because we follow so many generations, so many different characters, and so many of the characters have the same name. It almost feels like you're living the same day over and over and over again with slight variations here and there. And I think that's maybe the quality that doesn't work for some people who read this book, who find it confusing or a bit overwhelming or a bit repetitive. But for me, that was something that really reinforced and amplified the themes that were being explored. This was originally published in 1967 in Argentina, and we're following the Buendia family as they rise and fall over, again, many generations. And Márquez really seamlessly blends reality and the fantastical with that magical realism that Latin American literature is so well known for. In many ways, this is a critique of the government, of society, exploring issues like war, power, bureaucracy, and so much more. But it also tells a much more personal story and explores themes of solitude and fate and family and love. Like I said, this does have a bit of a cyclical feel to it, a bit of a repetitive feel because it is a family saga and we're following generation after generation. And they are dealing with those same issues over and over again, but that does underpin the theme of history repeating itself, the cyclical nature of history, and allows Márquez to really deeply explore some of the society level themes that he is trying to get into, things like colonialism and war and the constant push and pull between traditional and modern values, looking into themes of corruption and power, war and influence, and the impacts of colonialism. And then on a more personal level with some of these characters, we're getting into the inescapability of fate and solitude, isolation, loneliness, and family, and the complexity that is family. I just think this is, another example of a book that is beautifully written and really a lovely experience to just luxuriate in, especially because of the structure of this novel. It really is something you kind of have to let go and just let yourself submerge in the pool of this narrative and let it wash over you. It does have a bit of a dreamlike quality to it, especially because of that magical realism, but it is exploring real issues and the characters feel like real people and have real problems and really jump off the page and are incredibly engaging. And it's just an experience unlike any other. And I will say the final chapter of this book is one of the greatest final chapters of any book I've ever read. I'll just say that, just masterfully done. So if you have not read this book yet, I would highly recommend it. It is really, truly incredible. And that brings us to number 1 on my list. Again, this is less of a ranking and more of a look at all these amazing books that I love so much. But I will say that when people ask me what my favorite classic is, this is usually the book that comes to mind. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I love it so much. So number 1 on my list is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. The Picture of Dorian Gray was originally published in 1891, and this takes place in Victorian England. It's Gothic fiction. It does have a lot of horror elements, and it's also very philosophical. There are many philosophical discussions throughout, and that's definitely one of my favorite aspects of this story. This is not as overtly queer as we have come to expect from modern literature, but for its time, it was pretty scandalous, and it just has so much to say about so many themes that I find incredibly fascinating, from society's obsession with youth and beauty, the superficiality of society and of human beings, the duality of human nature, that warring between the good and evil, the angel and the devil on our shoulders, consequences of hedonism and corruption. And we follow our protagonist Dorian Gray as his pursuit of youth and beauty grows into an obsession that corrupts him on a fundamental level. And it is such an interesting book. I just love it so much. Lord Henry is a side character who has so many witty monologues about a variety of topics. He really feels like a stand-in for Wilde himself, where he can just, share his observations of society ad nauseum, and I love it. And Dorian himself is a fascinating character because we really get to watch him go through such a huge transition, such a transformation from the first chapter to the last. He has one of the biggest transformations that I have ever read for a character in a story, and this isn't even a very long book, but he just goes through so much. He changes so much. And he is such a multi-layered, multifaceted character, very complex, very morally gray, just absolutely fascinating to read about. And of course, this story has really spawned many stories that are inspired by this concept and taps into that fundamental fear that I think every human being has on some level of death, of our own mortality, and really plays with that idea in a way that is both harrowing and terrifying at times, but also witty and satirical and hilarious at moments. And it feels very human while still having this maybe more supernatural horror element to it. And I just love it so much. I think it has, so much to say thematically, but also has these really vivid, really complex characters and is just lots of fun to read, to be honest. Very thought-provoking, which I obviously love. So this is my number one, and those are my top 10 favorite classics that I have ever read. Of course, like I said, there are so many classics that I have not read yet, so many that I need to get around to, but obviously I would love to hear your recommendations, especially now that you know my top 10 favorites. You might have a bit of a better idea of my taste. So if there are classics you think I would love, please leave them in the comments down below. I would love, love, love to read more classics this year and really prioritize that. Of course, like I said, my patrons are going to get a part 2 to this video where I'm going to share even more of my favorite classics. So if you want to see that, make sure to join the Patreon at any of the 4 paid tiers. Let me know your thoughts on the potential of creating a YouTube membership space on this channel so that you can get those bonus videos without going to Patreon. What are your thoughts and feelings? Let me know. I'd love to hear it. And thank you again to Wilde for partnering with me on this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box or use this QR code and my code PlantBasedBride for 20% off your purchase. This code won't last long, so click the link in my description box or use the QR code to try Wilde today, especially if you want to snag their limited edition cat cases. They are so cute. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to watch all my other favorites videos, the link to the playlist is in the description box. And I will be back very soon with my next favorites. It's a little bit of a wild card, I feel like. So keep an eye out, turn on notifications if you don't want to miss it, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.